Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're talking about a moment of supreme bitter irony, and there is a title in a German newspaper that puts it quite well. Brexit U-turn, Britain crawls back into the Erasmus program. And this is not just a policy change, it's a full-scale admission of failure, a quiet surrender wrapped in the language of a breakthrough. And my personal view is that we are watching a once proud nation finally realize that the sovereignty they were sold was nothing more than an expensive self-inflicted isolation. For years, the architects of Brexit told the British public that they could do better on their own, but now the bill is coming due and they are literally paying hundreds of millions of euros just to get back what they threw away. And let's look at the cold hard numbers that the government in London would rather you didn't focus on too much. Britain is going to pay around £570 million, which is more than 640 million euros, just for the first year of re-entry in 2027. And think about that for a second. They're paying over €500 million for a single year to rejoin a program they abandoned in 2021 as part of their newly won freedom. Back then, Boris Johnson and his government sold the exit as a way to save money and to take back control. They even created a domestic alternative called the Turing scheme, which many critics and even the government's own analysis now see as a poor, underfunded imitation of the real thing. And now, 4 years later, the reset under Keir Starmer has led to this: Britain crawling back to Brussels, wallet in hand, to beg for a seat at the table. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. And Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Minister for European Relations, is calling this a breakthrough and a huge win for our young people. Yes? Young people will do like that. But it takes a special kind of political nerve to describe the act of buying back a stolen bicycle as a breakthrough. It wasn't a win for young people when the government stripped them of these opportunities in 2021. And it's certainly not a win to spend 640 million euros to fix a problem you created yourself. But of course, for the 100,000 British students who are expected to benefit in that first year, it is good news. But it's good news that comes with a very heavy price tag. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, was much more diplomatic, saying this opens the door to new shared experiences and lasting friendships. And you can almost hear the quiet satisfaction in her tone. She knows that London has finally blinked. The Erasmus program isn't just about university lectures. It has supported more than 18 million people since it started in 1987. It's about internships, professional development for staff, and cultural exchange, the very things that Brexit was designed to restrict. And for students across Europe, this is a relief because it means that world-class institutions like Oxford, Cambridge, and the London School of Economics are finally becoming accessible again without the insane international fees that have kept so many away since 2021. And since the Brexit exit, the number of EU students in the UK has plummeted by nearly 50% in some sectors because they were treated like any other international student, forced to pay upfront fees of £18,000 or more. And the UK government is now desperately trying to spin this as a fair deal, boasting that they negotiated a 30% discount for the first year. Well, they pushed for a 50% discount, but the EU stood firm. They know that the UK needs this more than the EU does. And this re-entry into Erasmus is just one piece of a much larger pattern of Britain slowly, quietly and expensively undoing the damage of the last decade. We've seen it with the Horizon Europe research program. And now we are seeing it with student exchanges. The splendid isolation of Brexit is being dismantled, brick by expensive brick, as the reality of a globalized world crashes into the fantasies of 2016. It turns out that taking back control mostly just meant taking back the responsibility to pay more for fewer benefits. The 2025 UK-EU summit in London was the moment this really accelerated, with both sides agreeing to work toward rapprochement in trade, security and now education. But let's be honest, this isn't a partnership of equals anymore. This is a country that realized its domestic alternatives were failing and that its youth were being left behind by their peers on the continent. The Turing scheme was supposedly meant to be truly global, but it lacked the reciprocal nature that makes Erasmus so valuable, the ability for students to come to the UK as well as leave it. Without that reciprocity, UK universities were losing out on the diversity and talent that EU students bring to their campuses. And now, the British taxpayer has to cough up €640 million to restart an engine they intentionally stalled. It's a massive admission that the ideology of Brexit has failed the next generation. And every time a British student heads to Paris or Berlin in 2027, they should remember that their opportunity was stolen from them for 6 years by politicians who cared more about slogans than students. The path back to Europe is going to be long, and as we can see from this Erasmus deal, it's going to be incredibly expensive. The British government is learning the hard way that it's much cheaper to stay in a room than it is to break the door down and then pay the landlord to let you back in through the window. This U-turn is a victory for common sense, yes, but it's also a monument to the staggering waste and vanity of the entire Brexit project. And the outside view is that Britain is finally starting to wake up from its decade-long fever dream, but the recovery is going to cost a lot more than just money. It's going to cost a lot of pride too, and frankly, that pride is something they probably cannot afford right now anyway.